Today, we're diving into, well, the fascinating evolution of higher education. Specifically, we're focusing on digital learning materials and these things called social annotation platforms. The digital shift in education has been immense. Places like South Korea are even exploring national digital textbook strategies. It's a huge dynamic area.
It really is. And to narrow our focus a bit, we're looking at a pretty groundbreaking study from South Korea. It zeroes in on what actually makes university students stick with these digital platforms long term. The study doesn't just look at any digital tool, but specifically social annotation, which is, well, essentially collaborative commenting and highlighting right within digital texts.
Right, collaborative commenting. And the research highlights a specific platform called Perusall. Plus, they looked at two core concepts: interactivity and playfulness.
Mm.
Think about those words in like an online learning context. What makes something engaging and what makes it, fun enough to keep coming back?
Precisely.
Yeah.
So our goal for this deep dive is to figure out the most important factors influencing students' continuance intention.
Mm.
That means not just if they try a digital tool once, but why they commit to it semester after semester. Why do some digital tools become, really integral to learning, while others just gather digital dust? And what surprising insights did these researchers actually find, but what drives that sustained student engagement? Let's dive in.
Okay, so let's start with this concept. Social annotation, or essay. Imagine you're reading an article, maybe a textbook chapter, but instead of making notes just for yourself in the margin, everyone in your class is contributing to the same digital copy. You're highlighting bits, asking questions right there in the text, responding to your classmates, all in real time. It really turns reading alone into something communal.
It really does. Social annotation truly has, well, significant educational potential. It moves beyond just individual reading and really fosters interactive, collaborative learning. Global research, for instance, has pretty consistently shown positive cognitive and emotional outcomes for students using these tools. It seems to boost both engagement and deeper understanding. It's definitely more than just a digital highlighter.
And what's interesting about this source, the study we're looking at, is that it points out a key gap in earlier research, especially domestically, on digital learning materials. A lot of that previous work focused on simple ebooks or maybe multimedia effects, often with kind of mixed results. There wasn't really a deep dive into these truly collaborative social annotation features. So yeah, this study fills a crucial void.
Right. And the specific platform they focused on is Perusall. It's a tool developed at Harvard designed specifically to let students collaboratively comment, highlight, and discuss digital texts. So in this study, professors would upload pre-class readings, and students would use Perusall to annotate and interact. It's important to note, though, it's considered a digital learning material platform, not like a formal state-approved digital textbook, but it serves a similar function.
hmm And the benefits of Perusal are pretty well established, even beyond this one study. The source mentions several prior research efforts showing things like improved academic achievement, increased student motivation, and enhanced metacognitive skills, like the ability to ask better, more probing questions about the material. It really shifts things from passive reading to a much more active learning environment.
Definitely. And to understand how Perusall works so effectively, the study highlights a distinct four-step interaction process. First, students do their individual reading and annotation, adding initial notes, questions, maybe opinions. Then, step two, they move to peer annotation, exploration, and interaction. So they read what others have written, respond to comments, find new perspectives on the material.
Okay, so they're building on each other's ideas.
Exactly. Which naturally leads to step three, collective knowledge construction. All those accumulated annotations lead to a shared understanding and often, critical discussion around complex ideas. And finally, there's instructor feedback. Professors monitor the discussions, clarify points, provide guidance, and they often highlight high-quality contributions, which, as you can imagine, really motivate students.
That four-step process really shows the intentionality behind Perus's design. And it's probably no coincidence it feels so collaborative because, as the source points out, Perusal's whole structure aligns beautifully with established cooperative learning theory. Can you elaborate on how it hits those key elements, especially the ones identified by researchers Johnson and Johnson and others?
Absolutely. The researchers found Perusall embodies 5 core elements of effective cooperative learning really well. Take, for instance, positive interdependence. That's the idea that everyone's contribution is essential for a full understanding. So one student's question might spark an answer from another, making the group effort crucial for everyone's insight.
Right, everyone relies on everyone else. And then there's individual accountability, you mentioned.
Yes, each student usually has minimum annotation requirements, like, say, 5 comments per activity, and the platform tracks their participation and the quality of their input. This ensures no one is just passively lurking, which, can sometimes happen in group work.
Yeah, that makes sense. Keeps everyone involved.
Then we see promotive interaction in action. The questions, the answers, even upvotes on helpful comments. It encourages that dynamic exchange. Students also develop digital social skills, learning online etiquette, and how to give constructive feedback in a virtual space. That's huge. And finally, there's group processing, which sort of encourages students to reflect on the annotation process itself, how they collaborated, what works, maybe what didn't.
Okay, so it's quite structured.
It is. And Perusall really goes beyond just being a simple ebook reader by automating a lot of the grading, assessment, and report generation based on participation and quality.
Yeah.
This isn't just about making things easier for the instructor, though it does that too. It actively strengthens what's called social presence, that feeling of being connected to other learners, and that directly boosts motivation. These automated features are a really fundamental differentiator from less interactive digital stuff.
Okay, so with all that context on perusal and social annotation, let's talk about the research framework itself. The researchers built on the well-known technology acceptance model, or TAM, which basically says if users think a tech is useful and it's easy to use, they're more likely to adopt it. Pretty straightforward, right?
It is, but in education, continuance intention, that long-term commitment to keep using it, is way more critical than just initial adoption. Why? Because learning effects are cumulative. The real benefits of a platform like Perusall only show up with sustained use. It also impacts the return on investment for universities, obviously. And crucially, for social annotation tools, a strong active learning community only really forms through consistent ongoing student participation. So, understanding why students stay is paramount.
Yeah, I can see why that long-term view is so vital. Makes perfect sense. And speaking of social, this isn't just one person and a screen, is it? Which is why the researchers expanded the traditional TAM. They added two key variables that directly address that social and engaging nature, interactivity and playfulness.
Exactly. And these additions aren't just random, they're grounded in strong theory. Interactivity is defined as the degree of interaction between users, the system, and other users. It's crucial because learning is inherently social. Think Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, right? The idea that learners achieve more when collaborating. High-quality interaction among learners is just a consistent success factor for these essay tools. It directly influences satisfaction and the intention to keep using them.
Okay, interactivity makes sense. What about playfulness?
Playfulness refers to the degree to which a learning activity is perceived as enjoyable and fun. In other words, this is linked directly to intrinsic motivation. I mean, when students find something fun, engaging, they're more likely to develop positive attitudes and hopefully increase their sustained use of the platform.
Sure.
Makes intuitive sense.
So the study essentially set out to answer some really clear questions then, like how did students generally experience perusal? How do interactivity and playfulness affect how useful and easy they perceive it to be? And the big one, how do usefulness and ease of use then impact their long-term intention to keep using the platform?
Exactly. And to answer these, the study gathered data from 77 pre-service teachers. They were enrolled in education courses at a Korean university using Perusall for pre-class reading assignments across 3 semesters. Now, this is a particularly interesting group because they're not just learners, they're also future educators. So their perceptions have this kind of double layer of significance as users and as potential implementers in their own future classrooms.
Okay, so what did they find? Let's get to the results.
Well, the overall user experience with Perusall was generally positive, pretty much across the board. Interactivity, playfulness, perceived usefulness, perceived ease of use, and continuance intention all scored relatively high. And students were actively engaged. They spent an average of over 70 minutes per activity.
Wow, 70 minutes for pre-class reading. That's a lot of time. Suggests they were really getting into it.
It does, and their annotations showed active engagement too. About 17% were questions, and a huge 83% were responses to others. So definitely a lively discussion happening.
Okay, so generally positive. What specific positives came out in the surveys or open-ended feedback?
Students really valued how easy it was to ask professors questions directly in the text. And the peer discussion aspect consistently scored highest, and they found it really helpful. They also mentioned liking the diverse menus, finding classes generally fun and enjoyable. Fundamentally, Perusall was seen as helpful for learning. Things like boosting class participation, fostering interaction, promoting deeper engagement came up a lot.
Okay, sounds pretty good, but were there any downsides, any challenges?
Oh yes, There were definitely some nuances and challenges. While generally positive, there were individual differences. Some students noted issues with compatibility with personal learning styles,
Hmm.
basically saying it wasn't suitable for their particular study methods. Also, usefulness for academic achievement was rated slightly lower than other aspects of usefulness. Interesting, huh? And the desire to use for all subjects was also lower than other continuance intention items. Suggests maybe it's better suited for certain types of courses.
Hmm. Okay. What about the open-ended feedback? Any specific complaints?
Yeah, some practical things came up. Concerns about eye strain from screen time, which is understandable. Accessibility issues for students who maybe didn't have tablets readily available. And, a lingering preference for printing things out and taking physical notes for some students. And importantly, some students view the annotation activity itself as more of a chore rather than an organic part of learning.
Right, the required assignment feel. Okay, so that's the general experience. What about the quantitative results, the impact of interactivity and playfulness?
This is where it gets really interesting. The study found that interactivity strongly influenced both perceived ease of use and perceived usefulness. So basically, the more students felt they could easily interact with the system and with each other, the easier and more useful they found the platform for their learning. That makes sense.
Okay, interaction helps both ease and usefulness. Makes sense. What about playfulness, the fun factor?
Here's the first big surprise. Playfulness, that fun element, actually had no significant effect on how easy students found the platform to use. None. And its impact on perceived usefulness was surprisingly weak.
Wow, really? So making it fun didn't make it feel easier to operate?
Apparently not in this context. This really challenges some common assumptions, doesn't it? It suggests that maybe for these kinds of deeper learning tasks, students prioritize functional efficiency over just pure enjoyment when judging ease of use. The cognitive effort of annotating might outweigh the fun aspect in that calculation.
That's fascinating. Okay, any other unexpected findings?
Yes, another one. Perceived ease of use. How easy they found it did not significantly influence perceived usefulness.
Wait, so easy to use didn't mean useful. That seems counterintuitive, too.
It does initially, but think about it.
Oh.
For critical thinking tasks like these pre-reading assignments, maybe students don't equate easy to click around with useful for helping me actually learn complex stuff. They seem to prioritize the actual learning outcome itself, even if the tool requires a bit of effort to use effectively.
Okay, so interaction boosts usefulness and ease. Fun doesn't really impact ease and only weakly impacts usefulness. And ease doesn't automatically translate to usefulness for this kind of task. Interesting dynamics. What about the bottom line then? What predicted whether students wanted to keep using it? The continuance intention.
Well, the findings confirm the core idea of TAM. Both perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use were significant predictors of continuance intention. So fundamentally, if students perceive a tool as useful for their learning, and it's relatively easy to manage, they're much more likely to stick with it long term. Usefulness and ease still matter for adoption.
Got it. So usefulness and ease are still crucial for getting students to stay, even if the path to usefulness and ease has some twists. What about indirect effects?
Right. Looking at the pathways, interactivity had a strong indirect effect on continuance intention, working through both usefulness and ease of use. But crucially, playfulness did not have a significant indirect effect. So the takeaway seems clear. While making it fun might be nice, it's the active, meaningful interaction that really drives students to stick with these kinds of digital learning tools in higher ed.
That is a huge takeaway. Active interaction trumps fun for long-term use in this context. So what does this all mean, for designing future digital learning tools or for the policies that guide how universities use them? This study seems to offer some really practical advice.
It really does. First, for policymakers and designers, the clear message is prioritize interaction-centered features. Focus on robust, real-time commenting, effective discussion support, clear highlighting tools, rather than just, adding superficial fun elements or gamification.
So function over fluff, basically.
In a way, yes, especially when it comes to driving long-term use for learning. Second takeaway, flexibility is absolutely key. We need to acknowledge that students have different learning styles. A one-size-fits-all approach to digital textbooks or materials just won't work. Not all subjects or all students prefer digital for everything. Some still need or want physical notes, and that should be okay.
Right. Avoid the mandatory digital-only approach.
Exactly. Third, these tools can't just be dropped into a course. They need thoughtful integration with teaching strategies. Things like the flipped learning model, where students engage with the material before class using the tool, and then use class time for discussion and application. That seems like a natural fit. And professors need real training on how to use these tools effectively, pedagogically, not just a technical tutorial on button clicking.
Good point. The tool is only as good as how it's used.
Precisely. Fourth, regarding playfulness, it's not that it's bad, but maybe the focus should be balanced. Instead of overdoing gamification, focus on features that support students' self-regulation and metacognition. Things like automatic feedback on annotations, clear activity reports, progress tracking, those might be more valuable engagement features in the long run than badges or points.
So supporting the learning process itself rather than just trying to make it superficially fun.
Exactly. And finally, a really crucial takeaway, especially thinking about policy. We have to address digital access gaps. Implementing programs to provide devices or digital literacy training is essential. Otherwise, we risk creating a new kind of educational inequality. Equity has to be part of the conversation.
Absolutely critical point. Now, just for balance, it's always good to mention limitations. Did the researchers note any?
They did. They pointed out their sample size was relatively small, just 77 students. Also, the study was specific to one platform, Perusall. The findings might not apply universally to all essay tools. And it used a cross-sectional design, basically, a snapshot in time. It didn't track how student perceptions might have changed over a longer period.
Okay, good to keep in mind.
But despite those limitations, this study really is a pioneering step. It helps us understand how these increasingly popular social annotation platforms are actually adopted in higher education. And the message is pretty clear, that collaborative interaction seems to be a significantly more powerful driver for student buy-in and sustained use than just trying to make it playful. It definitely sets a clear direction for future development and implementation.
That's a powerful insight, definitely. So it leaves us with a question, doesn't it? Considering these findings, how might emphasizing interactivity, genuine collaborative engagement over simple fun, fundamentally change how we approach not just digital textbooks, but maybe any collaborative online learning experience in the future? Something for all of us to chew on. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks so much for joining us. You can find more information about our show and this topic on our website. Until next time, keep digging deeper.